The Comanche warrior pulled his horse up at the edge of the rancher's land 20 minutes before sunrise. Behind him sat a woman with hair the color of a crow's wing and pale eyes that did not belong to her face. He had taken her once, 11 summers ago, when she was small enough to carry on one shoulder. Tonight, he was bringing her home. He did not know if the rancher was still alive. He did not know if the rancher would shoot him on sight. He did not know the man's daughter remembered anything at all. What he knew was this. He had watched her kneel by a creek last winter and weep for a yellow photograph she kept folded against her skin. He had watched her trace the faces in it with a fingertip and mouth a word he did not understand. He had walked into the wind to ask her, finally, what the word meant. She had given him the only English word she still owned. Papa. He had known then that whatever it cost him, he would have to take her back. He settled in the dark. 20 minutes outside the gate. 20 minutes from sunrise. 20 minutes from ruining his life. Before we go further, wherever you are tonight, in your kitchen, in your chair, in your quiet hours, leave us a word in the comments. Tell us where the silence is sitting beside you. We would like to know who is listening. Because the West is a wide country and a lonely country, and stories like this travel better when 100 strangers are walking through the dark with you. He let the mare drink from the tank. She sat behind him with the blanket pulled to her chin. Her English came back to her in pieces through the night. He might be dead, she whispered. He is alive, Two Trees said. He had ridden 3 days in winter, just to ask. A blacksmith in a town he would not name had told him the rancher was still on his land. Still stubborn. Still alone. Why you bring me back, she said. He didn't answer for a long time. A coyote laughed somewhere across the grass. Because I stole you, he said. And I am trying to be a man I can stand. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. He didn't look at her. Two Trees, she said. Yes. That is a good name for that. The rancher woke before dawn the way he had woken every dawn since 1879, when his wife Margaret had sickened and died in the bedroom that still smelled of her lavender, when his daughter Ruth had been somewhere out on the prairie with the horses and was never seen again. Abel Harlan had not left this land. He had not remarried. He had not learned to be easy inside his own skin. He was a tall man, going thin in the shoulders. He had a beard he did not trim and eyes the color of creek water in shadow. He had buried 3 dogs. He had not buried his hope. He came out onto the porch with his coffee. He stopped. There was a horse at the tank, a man beside it in Comanche dress, and behind the man, a young woman with a blanket around her shoulders and dark hair and pale eyes. The woman was looking at the house. Abel's coffee cup tilted in his hand. He barely felt the hot splash against his wrist. He was watching a face he had not seen in 11 years come slowly back to life. Margaret, he said, before he knew he was saying anything. The young woman flinched. She shook her head. Her name is Ruth, the warrior said. She is your daughter. Two Trees stepped up onto the porch. He was a tall man, brown-skinned and solemn, with 2 eagle feathers braided into his hair and a scar that ran from the corner of his left eye down into his collar. He did not look like a kidnapper. He looked like a man delivering a letter 11 years overdue. Sit down, Abel said. Two Trees did not sit. I will not sit in your house. You carried my daughter home. You will sit in my house. The young woman watched them from the rail. Her name on this side of her life was Ruth Harlan. On the other side, she had been Yellow Bird among the tall grass. She had learned to braid her hair in 2 cues at 6, to ride bareback at 7, to make pemmican at 8. She had learned, at 15, that somewhere far away there was a man whose face she had not seen since she was small, who had not stopped waiting for her. She had not wanted to come. She had not wanted to make the warrior leave his own people and ride into the country that feared him. But he had stood outside her lodge one morning in winter and said, calmly, in broken English, "We will go to your father. I will not come back. He has waited long enough." She had not answered for an hour. Then she had begun to pack. Abel made coffee for himself and for the young woman and did not offer any to the warrior. He watched Ruth touch the rim of the cup with both hands. He watched her blow on it. He watched the little flinch of her shoulders, like a horse hearing a remembered voice. "Are you hungry?" Abel said, even though his throat was too tight to speak the words properly. She nodded. He went inside and came back out with bread and a little tin of molasses. He set them on the rail between them. She did not eat. She held the bread in both hands, looked at it, looked at him, and began to cry quietly, in the careful way a person cries when they have been taught not to waste sound. Abel did not touch her. He sat down on the step. He let her cry. After a long time he said, very quietly, I have been making your mother's bread wrong for 11 years. I will learn your way now, if you let me. Two Trees, leaning against the post at the other end of the porch, closed his eyes. He had not been trained in patience. He had been trained in patience. Calder Voss was drinking his morning coffee on the veranda of his own house, 7 miles east, when one of his riders came up the lane on a sweat-darkened horse. The rider was a young man named Darius Crow, who had the kind of face that didn't smile unless it was paid to. Voss set his cup down. Out with it, he said. There is a Comanche at Abel Harlan's place, Darius said. With a woman. Voss was still for a moment. His fingers tightened around the handle of his cup. He let it go so slowly that he was almost gentle about it. A woman, he said. Young, dark-haired. Sits like she's been on a Comanche horse. Voss leaned back. He had always known, in the part of his mind he did not look at directly, that this day might come. He had paid men to go wrong in 1879. He had paid men to not ask questions afterward. He had burned a letter in his kitchen that he had been given by a man who was no longer alive. He had thought her dead. She wasn't supposed to come back, Darius said. Voss looked up at him with a smile that was 3 parts weather. Nobody is, he said. Until they do. He told Darius to ride to town and quietly gather 4 men. He told him to bring the larger rifles and not to ask why. Then Voss finished his coffee, slowly, watching the sun come up over the eastern pasture, and considered how much land a dead man's grief had cost him. 11 years of patience. He was tired of being patient. Two Trees had counted out his time at the ranch the way a man counts out coins before leaving a town. He had planned to be gone by sunrise. He had understood, going in, that he could not walk a Comanche man into a white man's house and expect to walk back out again. But the rancher fed his daughter bread and molasses and did not touch her, and the daughter did not yet know how to stop crying. Two Trees was not the kind of man who left a wounded thing lying in the grass. So instead of shaking hands at the gate, he stayed on the porch through the morning. He waited for the daughter to dry her face. He waited for the rancher to ask the questions he had earned. Why? Abel said, finally, near 11 o'clock, when the light had gone thick and gold. I was one of 6, Two Trees said. I was 17. I did not decide. The older men decided. There were 2 older men still alive when I left this country. One is asleep in his teepee. The other is buried in a place nobody visits. You killed one, Abel said. Yes. Why that one? Because he laughed at my sister once, in front of me. And I did not forget it. Two Trees looked at Ruth. I have dreamed of your face, he said, since I was 17 years old. I have dreamed it so often that when I see you now, I do not see the woman you have become. I see only the girl on my shoulder. She did not answer for a long time. When she did, she said, very quietly, Two Trees, do not lie to me about her. I will not, he said. She did not cry, Ruth said. On the ride. She sat behind me on your horse for 3 nights, and she did not cry. Two Trees went very still. Abel looked away. Ruth said, some mornings she used to come talk to me on the cream stool in the summer. She used to bring me a piece of cold bread. She used to say, I will come back for you one day. Be patient with me. Abel swallowed. Be patient with me, Ruth said. I was patient. Would you have ridden 3 days into that country to bring her back, knowing it would cost you everything? Or would you have left it alone, the way most of us leave the broken things alone? Somewhere around the middle of the afternoon, the men came. They came on the east road, 4 of them, with long guns visible across their saddles. They came easy, not in a hurry. They came the way men come when they think the house is empty. Two Trees saw them first. He had been keeping an eye on the road. He stood up from the porch rail. He did not speak. He lifted his hand, palm out, slow, toward Ruth. Stay inside, he said. Abel did not say stay inside. He said, what? Half turned already, his rifle already in his hand from where it leaned behind the door. He had not done this in 11 years. He had been a man who did not have anything left worth shooting for. He had something now. The rider in the lead was Darius Crow. He pulled up about 30 yards from the gate. Harlan, Darius said. We heard you had a visitor. You heard right, Abel said, from the porch. And now you will leave my land, and you will take whatever you brought me back with you. Voss wants to speak with you, Darius said. Calder Voss can come speak with me himself, on my porch, and not before noon. He is welcome to bring any number of men to back him. They will not leave my land the same way they came onto it. Darius looked behind Abel, where Two Trees was standing in the yard, perfectly still, his hands visible at his sides, his face without expression. The thing about a Comanche warrior who has spent 11 years quietly carrying a debt is that he does not need to say anything. He needs only to be there. "Do not come back," Abel said. "I will not ask twice." The four men turned their horses. They went back down the east road at a walk. Two Trees stood in the yard a long time after they were gone. He had not been afraid. He had been watching himself instead. Abel came down off the porch. He stood beside him, in the dirt. "You did not need to do that," Abel said. "Yes, I did," Two Trees said. "I need you to keep her. So I stood in the yard so you could point the rifle and the warrior at the same time." Abel laughed. Once, a small broken thing. It was the first time he had laughed in a long time. "Well then," Abel said, "sit down and have some coffee." Two Trees did not sit on the porch. He sat in the dirt at the edge of the steps, with his back against the post, where he could see the road. Ruth came to the door. She had changed into a dress Abel had found in the back of the closet, a dress Margaret had worn the year before she died, pressed and folded, smelling faintly of lavender. "You're not leaving today?" Ruth said. He looked at her. "You're not leaving today? You can leave tomorrow. You can leave the day after tomorrow. But not today." Two Trees looked at Abel. Abel shrugged, the smallest shrug, the kind of shrug a man gives when he has given up trying to make the women in his life do anything sensible. "All right," Two Trees said. "Tomorrow." That evening the three of them sat on the porch in the last of the light. The bread was broken again. The molasses was passed around. The coffee was on the boil in the kitchen, and the dog was asleep under the chair. Ruth said, "Tell me about her." Abel said, "Your mother was the kind of woman who decided things. She was not loud, but nobody in this country decided anything without her nod." "What did she decide?" "Everything," Abel said. "Where to put the fence, whether to keep the dog, whether to have you, whether to wait for you. She decided to wait, and I have been waiting with her since. I have not always understood why, but I have not stopped." "Did she say my name?" "Every morning. Every morning she said your name as long as she could speak. Sometimes twice. Then once. Then just in her head. Did she ever think I was dead?" "She told me no. She said, 'I will not let myself think that. We will get her back, or she will come home.' And then she died. And I have been thinking the other thing for 11 years. Ruth was quiet for a long time. "Mama told me about you," she said. "She came to me in dreams. She sat on the edge of my sleeping mat and talked to me. She told me you were stubborn and lonely, and you kept a yellow photograph of her in your pocket all the time." Abel's hand went, very slowly, to the inside of his coat. "She told me," Ruth said, "to come home when I was ready. She told me, when I was ready, that a man would come to take me." Two Trees had stopped breathing. "Two Trees," Ruth said, "do not let this go to your head. She did not say it would be a Comanche. I do not know her." Two Trees said, very quietly, "But I will be glad to meet her when I am done with this country." They were quiet again. If this story is moving you, you are exactly who we wrote it for. A like and a subscribe tells us to keep going. Now it was Two Trees who had a difficult choice to make. He made it that night, while Abel slept and Ruth sat by the kitchen lamp. He walked in and said, in his careful English, "I am going to leave tomorrow, but I am going one place first." "Where?" Ruth said. "To Caldervos." "No," Ruth said. "You are not going alone. I am going to do a thing that belongs to me. Do not argue with me on this." "Into his front room," Two Trees said, "with the doors open. That is how a man who does not lie walks into a room." He went into the morning and did not say goodbye to Ruth. He stood in the yard with his horse saddled, in the early light, looking east. He heard her come out behind him. She was wearing a long skirt she had borrowed from one of the trunks in the house, and her eyes were pale and dry. "I am going with you," she said. "You are not." "I am going with you. You said so yourself. The man who brought me has the right to stand in front of him. That is me too." He studied her for a long moment. "All right," he said, "but you do not enter his house ahead of me." They rode east into the morning. Abel watched them from the porch, his hand on the rail where his wife's hand had been. He did not call out. He understood what was happening. He would not stand in the way of it now. Caldervos was finishing breakfast when the knock came on his front door. He opened it himself. The Comanche warrior was standing in the yard, with the morning sun at his back. Behind him, in a plain dress, with a yellow ribbon in her hair, was a young woman he had not thought he would ever see again. "Come in," Voss said. They came in. They sat in his parlor. Coffee was poured. The cups sat between them, steaming. "I know who you paid," Two Trees said. "I know the men who went wrong. I know what was promised them. I know what you did." Voss did not move. "How?" he said. "Because I am one of the men who went wrong. I am the youngest one. And I am the only one alive who is willing to say it out loud." Voss looked at Ruth. Ruth did not look away. "You have nothing," Voss said. "You are a Comanche. She is half Comanche in this country. You do not have the ear of any judge from here to Austin." "We are not here for a judge," Two Trees said. "We are here so you understand what is going to happen. Your riders will not come onto Abel Harlan's land again. Your riders will not ride down the East Road. If they do, I will be back, and I will not knock." Voss laughed, very slightly. "You will be back, and you will be shot." "Maybe," Two Trees said. "But you should know what is interesting about me, Voss. I am not the kind of man you aim a rifle at. I am the kind of man who comes in through the front door and stands in the parlor with the doors open. That is a different kind of thing." They sat for a long time. The coffee went cold. "It does not have to come to that," Voss said, finally. "I will tell my riders to ride the north fence first, not the south. I will not ride onto your land again. You have my word." "Your word is the reason we are here," Two Trees said. "We will not need to come back." They stood up. They walked out into the light. Two Trees took Ruth by the arm, very gently, the way a man assists a woman across a step. Voss closed his own front door behind them. He understood that something had changed in the room, and he could not unchange it. He understood that the young woman on the horse had not come into his parlor for his apology. She had come into his parlor so that he could see her face. He went back to his coffee. He sat down. He looked at the cup a long time. There were men in this country who could not be bought, and two of them had come into his parlor that morning, and one of them was his own victim. His empire did not fall that day, but the weight in him did. Within the year, after a run of bad luck with his cattle and a series of horses lost to a sickness he could not name, he sold the eastern half of his land to a widow named Temperance Moore. He moved his men off the South Range. By winter, he was gone from the country altogether. He moved to a small house in San Antonio, where he lived out the rest of his years in a kind of watchful quiet, never quite sure whether the rider on the rise was going to come down into his yard. But that was later. That was after. Ruth came back to the ranch late that same afternoon. Abel was on the porch. Two Trees was a few steps behind, walking the mare in to water her. Ruth stood in front of her father. She stood very still. "Papa," she said. Abel did not move. Then he raised his hand, very slowly, and put it on the side of her head. He did not pull her in. He did not squeeze her. He let his hand lie there, against her hair, the way a man lays his hand on something he is afraid will not be there if he turns around. "That's my girl," he said. Ruth leaned her head against his hand. She closed her eyes. Two Trees, leading the mare past them toward the tank, stopped. He watched the father and the daughter. He felt the oldest wound in him open a half-inch. It was the wound of not knowing whether you deserve to be in any house. He felt it open, and he let it. He set the mare to water. He walked back to the porch. He did not step up onto it. "I will go in the morning," he said. "Stay for breakfast," Abel said. "It is not every morning we have a daughter in the house." Two Trees did not smile, but something at the corners of his mouth moved. "I will stay for breakfast," he said. The next morning, after breakfast, Two Trees stood in the yard with his saddle on and the eastern road in front of him. Abel came down off the porch. He held out his hand. Two Trees took it. He had been trained wrong about the white man's handshake. He had been trained wrong about a great many things, and he was correcting them, slowly, one handshake at a time. "Come back," Abel said, "when you can. There is always a place at the table." Ruth came out of the house. She was wearing her own dress now. Her hair was down. She said, "Two Trees, I am going to learn your language. I am going to learn your mother's name. I am going to say it to my children one day." "You do not have to do that," he said. "I do," she said. "You carried me home. I will carry you the rest of the way I can." He swung up onto the mare. He turned her east. Then he touched the mare's flank, and the mare walked out into the long grass. And after a while, the eastern prairie took him in. That was a year ago. The summer Ruth came home, the wildflowers came up along the east fence. Abel ran cattle again that year for the first time since the worst winter. He bought a second dog from a man in town and named it Margaret, after his wife, and the dog had the same quiet temperament and the same habit of sleeping under the chair at supper. Ruth learned 9 words of Comanche in the first year. She learned to make her mother's bread the way her mother had made it, with a thin scrape of butter on the crust while it was still hot, and then a fold of clean cloth around the loaf so that the butter would not run out. 2 Trees wrote her 3 letters that year, written in ink in the careful letters of a man who had not been taught them. She read each one on the porch, in the mornings, when her father had not yet come out for his coffee. Abel began to talk more in the evenings. He talked about the ranch. He talked about the cattle. He talked about the woman he had loved and the daughter he had gotten back. Ruth sat on the porch with her coffee and listened, and did not interrupt, and let the country around her take her in. But she had her father beside her on the porch, and the prairie at her back, and the smell of coffee and bread going through the kitchen, and a piece of yellow paper folded thin against her skin, and the sound of an old man's voice, finally, after 11 years, telling a young woman everything he had held inside. 2 Trees, the next spring, rode west from the southern plains with a small bundle tied behind his saddle and stood at the edge of the rancher's land before sunrise. He did not come to the gate. He came to the rise, where the prairie dropped off to the east, and he sat his horse, and he watched the light come up over Harlan land. He watched his daughter step out onto the porch with a cup of coffee in her hand and her father behind her, his hand on her shoulder. He watched her lift her hand, once, toward the rise. He lifted his in answer. He sat for a long time. He did not go down to the gate. He understood that a man who returns a thing he has taken must also return the space around it. Strange, he thought, how the things you have given up on tend to find their way back to you in the morning. He turned the mare. He rode on west into the long grass, and the prairie took him back. Next time, we will tell the story of a one-armed prospector who was cheated out of his claim in Leadville, and the mute girl he found half-frozen in his doorway that December, who could read the rocks no one else could read. He did not learn her name until spring. We will not spoil it here.